I have miles and miles ahead of me, tales to listen to, time to spend. Up ahead, the road is bending. Wonder what's around the bend.
Hello, I'm Charles Kuralt. We're off again to meet a few people on the back roads of America. These are people you know, not from the front pages. They've never been on the front pages. They're people you know from next door and down the block. Their stories are some of my favorites from 25 years on the road. 3 stops are on our itinerary this time, with the proof at every stop that there is truth in certain old expressions.
Corn is a part of Indiana's economic structure.
The good Hoosiers of Indiana are corny. Tell them so, and they'll thank you for the compliment. Corn has deep meaning in this part of the world. And we talk about spirits soaring and hearts flying high. Meet Tom Smiley of New Mexico. He has given his heart to a falcon, so his heart really does fly high. But first to Rabun County, Georgia. Where there's smoke, there's fire. That's the adage we'll prove here.
I'll tell you about the kind of booze they make around here, made way back in the swamps and the hills, where there's a plenty of a moonshine still.
Moonshine has been sung about and sipped and made in the Appalachian Mountains ever since people began calling these hard, beautiful hills home. White lightning was made from the first by settlers from England and Ireland and Scotland. They and all their descendants have known the uses of mashed corn.
I might have broke the law here, the state law, but I don't believe I broke God's law, no.
One drop will make a rabbit whip a bulldog, and a taste will make a rabbit whip a wild hog. Make a toad spit in on a black snake's face, make a hard-shell preacher fall from the grave.
This is an old turnip-bottom still, maybe 50 or 60 years old. It's sort of a museum piece now, owned by the Blue Ridge Institute in Virginia, but it was a real working still in its day. And in his day, C.L. Radford was a real working moonshiner. He learned how from his daddy, which is the way most people learn to make corn whiskey.
It comes out about 180 proof, but you run it until it gets very weak, and then you take the weak and mix with the strong, and you proof it down to about 90 proof, and then you drink it. It's still pretty strong then. It don't take that much to kind of set you down, you know.
If you follow the crest of the Blue Ridge down from Virginia to Georgia, you'll never be far from a whiskey still, right to this day. But you won't ever see one, unless you know how to find it. Frank Rickman knows how, and without much trouble, he found us one. The owners weren't around to shake our hands when we got there. That was just as well. Moonshiners customarily do not welcome strangers to the premises.
Now, I guess this still would hold about 75 or 80 gallons, somewhere in that vicinity.
Frank Rickman knows how to find stills and judge their capacity because his father used to be the sheriff here in Rabun County, Georgia. And lots of times he went along when his daddy found stills and broke them up. Before breaking them up, it was customary for the lawmen to have a sip or two just to sample the product.
You know, we just all used it for just a little boost, you know, just pep you up a little, just make you smile, make you feel a little better.
On the other hand, there's Hubert Howell. He never acquired a taste for moonshine. He was never against making it, though, and he made a lot of it.
Whiskey is the worst thing it's ever been. But I always said whiskey was made to sell, not to drink. A man's a damn fool for drinking it, don't care who he is.
Hamper McBee doesn't moonshine anymore, but he admires a well-made copper pot as much as the next man. And this one is identical to certain well-made copper pots that Hamper McBee recalls fondly.
This is a good little old still, and it's light. You can move it. I mean, if the feds are after you or something, or they close, or you think somebody's turned you up, hunters or something, and you just set you a few mash barrels down the creek, then you can just grab this little old still up and move it. You know, ain't that much trouble. Just take it apart, pick it up, go down the stream, put it up again. You don't have all that trouble. See, the pot's light. Anybody can carry that pot. But you can make some good booze on this thing here. And I've drank enough to float a ship, I guess, out of it.
Maud Thacker is up in her 80s now. She doesn't look like a moonshiner, but when she was a little girl growing up in the shadow of Hendricks Mountain in Georgia, she hauled mash and bran for her father's still. Her father made moonshine and music too, and he taught his daughter to do both.
Hey, ha, ha, you and me, little brown jug, don't I love thee? Hey, ha, ha, you and me, little brown jug full of rye whiskey. That's all I know.
That may be all Maud Thacker knows of the song, but it's far from all she knows about moonshining. She knows you can't have a still without running water. These are the three principles of whiskey making. Build on the little branch of a big river, hide your still well, and make it portable.
We just move one place to another, so they never did cut us down but one time. But one time they cut my daddy down. He was making brandy.
The revenuers cut a lot of people down, but nobody much stayed cut down. The stills would grow back like weeds. Really, they had to. In good times and in bad, and especially in bad, moonshine was a hill farmer's best cash crop. You could make the dirt yield up just about enough to eat, but you couldn't make it yield money. For that, you had to fire up a still, get the corn mash to bubbling and steaming, and then cool the steam into moonshine. At the end of the great jumble of pipes and pots and barrels is the bit of pipe the liquor finally comes out of, and that is called the money piece. Even in the worst of times, during Prohibition and the Depression, the money piece worked wonders.
That was the best years of my life. It really was. The best years of my life. It was hard work, slavish work, but you see, I enjoyed it because I was doing good. I know a lot of people think it wasn't now, it don't seem like it was, but I was feeding lots of people that would have been hungry otherwise.
Is make liquor or starve. Well, I don't care who it is. When he gets to where he'll starve, if he's honorable enough to make liquor instead of stealing, he's the man I'm interested in. He's the man that's wanting to do the right thing. Lazy people don't make whiskey. Now, there's too much work involved, and especially when you've got an old still hid way off in the woods, and you've got to pack all that stuff in there and back out. Then you're working scared too all the time, because hell, you don't know when they're gonna run in there and get you.
Often the raiding lawmen are tipped off by paid informers. The mountain folk have an awful name for these informers. They call them reporters. But even when the reporters do their reporting well, the lawmen still have the problem of chasing the moonshiners down.
Never been caught as steal in my life. But Lord, I've run to my tongue hanging out.
Making the whiskey was one thing. Moving it was something else. For that, you needed a fast car. The man who drove the whiskey was called a tripper, and the car he loved to drive was a '39 Ford with a big V8. Well, this one is in good shape, isn't it?
It's a cream puff.
In those days, of course, the police cars didn't have radios, so a tripper could outrun the police. And when that failed, he could crash right through their roadblocks. Shade Radford remembers all that. How fast did you drive at your fastest?
Well, it's just the fastest we run. Most of the time it's around about 100 miles an hour.
On these mountain roads?
A lot of times, yeah, you had to.
So this was a good model for transporting moonshine, huh?
Well, I'd say it was the best. It was the best, more stabilized. Stable car on the road, you could maneuver it where you couldn't anything else hardly.
Well, sassafras has an aromatic flavor to it.
Whiskey is made for drinking, of course, but it's also made for healing. The folks here believe that if you take the right roots and herbs and soak them in a jar of white lightning, what you end up with is good for what ails you.
And a lot of old timers used to mix ginseng root and poke root and stuff with it, what they call making them some bitters, you know, for the rheumatism and stuff, you know.
Moonshining isn't what it used to be. Industry has come to the mountains, offering real jobs with real pay and no worry about going to jail. Some of the moonshiners here have walked away from their stills, but some never will. Earl Palmer guided us around these mountains, and he left us with this thought.
As long as the streams run cold and the woods are thick, as long as there are hills that God made, as long as there's a country, moonshine will always be made by someone or other. Handed down, there isn't any way to erase it from the mountain scene. No way.
Whiskey isn't the only thing that's been distilled in these hills. The people here are a distillation too, a boiling down of good Scots and Irish stock, refined by mountain summers and winters and condensed by hard times. Their memories go a long way back, all the way back to when whiskey making was any man's right. Up there somewhere in some hollow by a trickling branch, a hickory wood fire is licking the bottom of a copper pot right now, making mash bubble and boil. It's a way to make steam drinkable, and corn a little more profitable, and life a little more tolerable to this day. As long as the moon shines on the mountains, there'll be moonshiners in the hollows.
Cold snap in Indiana. The frost is on the pumpkin, they say here, and the fodder's in the shock. That's a line from the Hoosier poet James Whitcomb Riley, who is still alive out here in the small towns and on the back roads of Indiana, 60 years after his death. The husky, rusty rustle of the tossels of the corn and the rasping of the tangled leaves as golden as the morn. The stubble in the furrows kinda lonesome-like, but still a-preachin' sermons to us of the barns they growed to fill. The idea of the small farm and the small town as a kind of demi-paradise came to us in large measure from Riley and from Indiana. He wrote, "Right here at home, boys, just right where we are. Birds don't sing any sweeter anywhere." The rural places were the best places, and the old times were the best times, and that notion endures. Let a Hoosier accent tell it, that of Buford Bower down here in Clark County.
I think the life is wonderful today. It's full of life, but it's so changed. And I don't know, I read a lot about progress. I guess we're progressing. I don't say we're not, but I don't know for sure which direction we're going.
James Whitcomb Riley knew for sure. When old folks, they was young like us and little as you and me, them was the best times ever was, or ever going to be. He wrote about home, about the homely things that are still there in the American consciousness and on the Indiana map. From Delphi to Camden, little Hoosier towns. But here were classic meadows, blooming dales and downs. On the banks of Deer Creek, there's the place for me. Water sliding past you just as clear as it can be. Well, I never seen the ocean, nor I never seen the sea. On the banks of Deer Creek's grand enough for me. There is such a relief from the clangor and din of the heart of the town to go loitering in, through the dim, narrow walks with the sheltering shade of the trees waving over the long promenade and littering lightly the ways of our feet with the gold of the sunshine of Lockerbie Street. James Whitcomb Riley lived out his life in an old Victorian house on Lockerbie Street, Indianapolis, remembering, amid the cool halls and tall windows, the old haymow and the old swimming hole of his youth. Floyd Slats Logan of the Logansport Logans is an officer of the association that keeps up the house and honors Riley's memory. What do Hoosiers say when people say, Riley was corny.
Well, corn is a part of Indiana's economic structure. Without corn, we wouldn't have hogs, you know. And without hogs, you wouldn't have bacon and sausage and ham and all that sort of thing. So the corn crop is something even the city folks take a real interest in Indiana. And if it's corny, it means it's common. It's something you see every day and hear every day. So we're full of corn in Indiana.
There was a good corn crop in Indiana this year, and as James Whitcomb Riley would have said, did say, in fact, the air's so appetizing and the landscape through the haze of a crisp and sunny morning of the early autumn days is a picture that no painter has the colorin' to mock when the frost is on the punkin and the fodder's in the shock.
Okay, Jen, step up. Atta boy.
Here are a man and a falcon on a high mesa in New Mexico. I thought I knew something about friendship until I met Tom Smiley and Genesis. They are more than friends. They are bonded to each other.
Oh, there we are, Jen. Ah, how does that look?
What a beautiful bird.
Yeah. With those 8-power eyes, he's just taking everything in.
He sees farther and better than we do then.
Oh, yeah. If you had 8-power binoculars, that'll equal his vision. And now what he'll do now is what we call a rouse. He gets his feathers all lined up perfectly, and of course, that's what he needs to fly. Get the feel of the wind. And now he's about ready to go, I think. About ready to head out, Jen? Huh? Okay. Have a good one.
Tom Smiley raised Genesis almost from the day of his birth. The bird is part gyrfalcon, part peregrine, and part Tom Smiley.
Part of me is with that bird when he's up in the air like that. It's my spirit is in the air. I fly sailplanes and I like aviation and be in the air. But yet, when he's up there, it's a part of me that I've never witnessed anywhere else. We're just together. We are one. Looking good, Jen. Atta boy.
The peregrine falcon was nearly extinct on this continent just a few years ago. A handful of human beings, Tom Smiley among them, by breeding falcons, are returning them to their natural place in the sky.
These birds really fly. I have that saying, other birds flap, peregrines fly.
Other birds flap, peregrines fly. The peregrine falcon is the fastest, most powerful, most perfectly developed flying organism on the planet.
He's going after those horned larks, see him? Watch him now, you're going to see some flying. A lot of times he'll go so high, he'll get out of sight. You can't even see him, just be a dot in the sky. It's funny, sometimes just going out and flying this bird seems like the most important thing I do all day. How does that feel up there, huh? Oh, he likes that wind.
We watched Genesis fly for a time, trailing the telemetry wires that helped Tom Smiley find him, should he ever assert his independence too far and fly away over the mountains. And then we watched a man call a bird out of the sky with a single shout.
Ho!
And we watched the most stunning power dive in nature, a falcon rocketing toward Earth at the speed of 200 miles an hour.
Looking good, Jen.
I thought I knew something about friendship until I met these two.
How you doing, buddy?
Tom Smiley doesn't worry much anymore about Genesis flying away over the mountains.
Example out here, if I just let him loose in the spring, he'd go out and catch food and bring it back to me, as he would his mate in the wild, because he's imprinted to me. Yes.
Really?
Yeah. He's got me trained to do just what he wants me to do. End of a perfect day, huh, Jen? And down goes that. Here you go, Jen. There you go. Attaboy.
Falconry goes back 3,000 years and more. 3,000 years from now, if Tom Smiley has his way, there will be falcons in the sky. To him, the sky would be empty without them. Well, time to say goodbye until our next trip together. We've heard about a story up the road here, but we kind of hope we never get there. With luck, we'll stumble upon something more interesting along the way. I can see the road is bending. Wonder what's around the bend.
All these years I've been a-wondering, just when I think I'm near the end, I always see the road is bending, and I wonder what's around the bend.